story about love. Love lost, love found, love missing, love that transcends even the deepest hurt. At the center of the story is our titular character, Sula Peace. Sula, like all of us, longs to be loved, to be known and seen fully. But because of this generational trauma that she carries with her, she's unable to give and receive love in a healthy way. Now, before there was Sula, there was Hannah, and before there was Hannah, there was Eva. When Eva was a younger mother to 3 children, her husband of 5 years just up and left them one day with nothing but 3 beets and a very cold winter to come. For a time after that, Eva dedicated every ounce of energy, time, every resource to keeping her children alive. And that left no emotional bandwidth for nurturing affection, playing with your kids and being able to enjoy being a mother to children. She had to sideline all of that in order to simply keep her children alive. Now, after a time of her raising her children, she one day gave them to a friend and left. And then 18 months later, she returned with money in her purse and 1 less leg. Now, it is unknown what Eva did, what happened to her, but what we do know is that her children survived. One of her children being Hannah Peace. Now, Hannah Peace is Sula's mother, and she was married to Sula's father, and her husband died when Sula was very young. And she never remarried and stayed in the home with her mother and Sula. And although Hannah was able to raise Sula with far more ease, she did not give her, something that she didn't have to give. So what I mean by that is that she didn't give her any love or care beyond what she was obligated to. And where she did put her affections was in other men. It's said in the book that she got loving about almost every day. And so, as you can guess, there is this lack of affection, emotional distance between her and Sula. And as the people of Medallion would surmise, Sula is kind of this evil manifestation of both those women's worst qualities. She is selfish, self-serving, self-indulgent, and extremely indignant to every expectation that the people, that this town, that kind of the world has on her as a Black girl and subsequently a Black woman. Sula dares to ask this question: why? I can do it all, so why can't I have it all? And I think this frustration is shared by so many women, in Sula's time and now everywhere, in every community, everywhere. Why can't I have it all? Why can't I have everything that I want? Because I am capable of receiving everything that I want. So why? Why? And I think this frustration that she has, it very much undergirds everything that she does, all the decisions that she makes, the mindset that she has, and not even her greatest and only friend is kind of spared from Sula. Now, Nell, she was raised in an entirely different way. Her mother molded her into the perfectly mild-mannered wife and mother. Now, this very, very intense nurturing was born more so out of fear than love, because if we, again, trace the lineage of these women, before there was Nell, there was Helene, and Helene's mother was a sex worker who, we barely get to know her in the novel, but it would appear to me that she hardly acknowledges Helene's existence, and Helene very much did not get a motherly figure out of this woman. Having her, I forget her mother's name, apologies, having, her mother, who is not a mother to her at all, she desperately needs her daughter to be everything that this woman is not. She believes that it is completely necessary for Nell to play this role, to stick to this kind of straightforward trajectory in order to ensure her survival. Before Nell kind of is fully indoctrinated to this, there's a brief moment in her childhood where her and her mother take a trip to her grandmother's funeral, back to her mother's home, and she returns and she has this kind of spark, this kind of like rebellious spark, where she kind of dreams of traveling and having this very full and adventurous life. And although she doesn't get to realize this dream, it doesn't come to fruition for her. What this spark does bring to her is her friendship with Sula. Like it gives her kind of a little boost of confidence, the little bit of rebellion she needed to go befriend this girl who her mother wouldn't have wanted her to be friends with. Although Sula and Nell are raised in vastly different ways, vastly different environments by vastly different women, they still have this shared experience of having these mothers who don't really love them beyond, how much they are obligated to as mothers, as wives, as Black women in this community. They don't really get more than that. But I don't fault their mothers for that. I want to make that very clear. I think if we keep it very much in the context of where they're at and what they can see for their own lives, they needed to survive, and they needed their kids and their daughters to survive. And I think they're working with a very limited emotional framework for how that is done. So I don't want to fault them for that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a running theme throughout the book for all of our characters is there's a level of trauma, but specifically for Nell and Sula and the women that came before them, there is this generational trauma that very much affects them and affects their perception of one another, of their relationships, of everything. So I want to make that very clear. Sula and Nell are raised in very different ways, but they do have this shared experience of Black girlhood, of kind of having this reprieve in one another, in kind of the affection that they share and all the fun they are able to have together. That is something they do share. They're very much in sync with each other in a lot of ways. Very like mind, body, and spirit. They do eventually grow older, and the weight of reality is kicking in, and the older they get, and as these responsibilities and these expectations start to flood in, there becomes less and less space for their girlish affections, the girlish affection that they share. As I've been saying, like they have this kind of they both have this predestined role to play in this society, in the world. And even as Sula mentions, like no matter where she goes, like all Black people are the same. Like the expectations, the men, everything, it's all the same. So they have these predestined roles and these predestined expectations. And whereas Nell, she acquiesces and she resigns herself to this life, to raising her children, to having her children, to raising her children and having her husband. Whereas she, commits to that, Sula rejects it, and rebels against all of that. And this kind of final divide, not final, the first kind of division between them, it happens on the night of Nell's wedding, where at the reception she's dancing with her husband, and as she's embracing embracing this new era in her life, and this new stage in her life. Sula is also, going down her own path, and Nell sees her walking down the street, and they don't see each other again for 10 years. Their reunion is fantastic, very, very briefly. So they come back, or not they, Sula comes back, and they kind of fall back in step with each other when she visits Nell for the first time. And they're, laughing so hard. Nell almost pees herself, and just enjoying each other's company so much, and just getting right back to where they were as girls and catching up. There's a little bit of this conflict between them, between like their mindsets and how they see things, but ultimately that love and that just genuine joy of having each other's presence, it's still very much there. And then immediately after, we cut to Nell finding her husband Jude with Sula, and him leaving her, and immediately having that reunion kind of stopped in its tracks. During and after this situation, Sula displays a very strong cognitive dissonance. So up until this point, when we're seeing Nell and Sula together, you very much get the impression that Nell is someone who she is so grateful to have in her life, because she just understands her. She can kind of fill in the space where Sula lacks, and they very much complement each other. And there feels like there's a lot of closeness there. But at the same time, Sula does not possess kind of this something. Whatever that thing is inside of you that makes you emotionally connected to people and just care about them deeply in that way, Sula lacks it, even with Nell. And of course, this does not make sense, but as I said, we're talking about cognitive dissonance. So Sula has, in this very convoluted way, justified her actions, and I think she fully believes them. Like, I don't think she's trying to just say this so she appears better to anyone or anything like that. I think she very much believes that her and Nell are so in sync, so in step with one another, that what's yours is mine, what's mine is yours, and everything is so fluid between us. So she kind of lacks the very kind of like a superficial emotional connection that you have with other women. Well, I can say for myself, there's this kind of a pretty kind of superficial girl code sort of feeling that you get even with people who you're not super close with, but you do care for them and care about how your actions affect them. She lacks that very kind of base level emotional connection you need for a friendship, and does not understand how sleeping with someone's husband could hurt them deeply. I think she completely does not, as I said, she lacks something. She lacks whatever feeling, whatever kind of thing that switches in your brain that makes you kind of be considerate in that way. She completely lacks it. And as I said, it's this cognitive dissonance. She is completely unable to sympathize with Nell. And, up until the very end, Sula completely believes that what she did was totally fine, and that she doesn't understand how Nell never could get over it. This, again, is a through line of this generational trauma that she's carrying with her. Because to her, I don't know how much it was clear with Eva, but definitely with her own mother, she kind of grew up in this environment where all men are available, and kind of a loyalty to other women was like a secondary consideration. And then you also have that coupled with the lack of emotional connection that she had with her mother, that she needed in those very early days of her life, where the very foundational, where making these connections, she lacked that emotional connection with her own mother. And again, she's perpetuating this cycle of she also lacks it with her greatest friend, and she's unable to understand how she has hurt her, and how she has defied this rule of social etiquette as she defies all rules of social etiquette. Even in the end, Nell and Sula are never able to work through this. During their last conversation that they have, when Sula is quite literally on her deathbed, Nell is here and she's desperately trying to get Sula to understand that, like, you have hurt me deeply, and I want you to understand how you have hurt me, and I want you to be upset, and just desperately trying to get her to see that she was wrong. And ultimately in this conversation, Sula, she just very just apathetically says, like, I don't understand how you couldn't have gotten through this. I'm paraphrasing, so don't quote me on that. But she's like, I don't understand how you could have gotten through this, or how you couldn't have, like, gotten over this. And Nell, of course, is like, girl, what the hell? And she, stops there and, asks Sula, like, genuinely, you're here and you are dying. You have not a penny or a friend to your name. And even after all of the dirt you've done in this town, you still expect me to love you. And Sula assures her that yes, like, in the end, everyone will love her. And I won't read out the passage, but I will say it is perverse. So Sula, through her own convoluted and loveless sort of emotional way of thinking, I don't know, that didn't make sense. But through this very convoluted state of mind, she thinks that in the end, after the most perverse kind of actions have taken place, when the world has reached an apocalyptic state where we can't see up from down, and everything has gone wrong and is horrible and is horror, that it is only then that everyone will in fact love her. Among other things, this kind of way of thinking, it is indicative of how she has internalized the beliefs of that the people of Medallion have projected onto her, because I think it is indicative of the evilness that they see in her. And I will say, I think Sula Peace, for all of her misdeeds and misgivings, even with the weight of all of that, I think she is still deserving of more than this complete perversion, even if she can't see it for herself. And I think it's a tragedy that she passes before she can experience real, true, and genuine love and be able to reciprocate that. After Nell leaves there, that's the end of their story. That's the end of their love story. And I will clarify, this is a story of platonic love. So I don't want to sidetrack it, but it ultimately is a story of love that ends in tragedy, ends in heartbreak, ends in this kind of there's no resolution to it. There's no that's it. That's it. That's it. As I was trying to put the script together, I found myself just unable to really draw a conclusion, get to the lesson that I learned, all that stuff. And I will say, I have read this book 3 times in my life. I read it years ago when I read it for the first time when I was 20. I read it earlier this year, and then I've read it again recently so that I can make this video and talk about it. So I feel at this point I'm very familiar with the text, and I've kind of I've seen a lot that it has to offer. But I still, when I was what conclusion do I draw from this? I still had such a hard time coming up with it, because I think it's hard for me to kind of draw I guess it's like a positive conclusion from all this tragedy and like all the pain and all the hurt and all the heartbreak, and also the lack of a resolution. I was like, how do I end this when I feel like something's missing? And I, toyed with that idea of something here is missing. Something's missing. Something's missing. So, as I said, this is a story about love, mostly the lack of it. But what I've come to kind of understand is that it's also a story about possibility. And maybe Sula could have had a come to Jesus moment and recognized she was wrong, and her and Nell could have worked through this and healed through this trauma, this emptiness she has in her, and worked through that, and they could have had a long-lasting friendship. Maybe the Peace Women could have had different outcomes that didn't make them so like emotionally separated from one another, and none of this would have ever happened. Maybe Nell could have went on all the great adventures that she, dreamed up as a girl. Maybe her and Sula could have done that together. There's so many possibilities here. And there's a line in the book where Morrison toys with this idea of possibility of who Sula could have been. Okay, she says, in a way, her strangeness, her naivete, her craving for the other half of her equation was a consequence of an idle imagination. Had she paints or clays or knew the discipline of the dance or strings, had she anything to engage her tremendous curiosity and her gift for metaphor, she might have exchanged the restlessness and preoccupation with whim for an activity that provided her with all she yearned for. And like any artist with no art form, she became dangerous. And I want to return to this question that I keep asking over and over. Why? I can do it all. Why can't I have it all? And that's something that since I read it, it just plays in my head over and over. It's just this question of why? Why did it have to turn out this way? With all of the possibilities that we have, or all of the lifetimes that Sula Peace could have had, why did she land on this one in particular? And of course, as a question, that's just how Toni Morrison wrote it. And yes, I know this, but just think bigger. We're imagining possibility here. But so it's it's just back to the question of just why? Why? I know that I can do it all. I can have so much. I am capable of so much. So why can't I, have it all? In another life, another time, another place, she could have lived her life in such a way that she wouldn't have had to ask. She wouldn't have had to carry this frustration, carry this emptiness, carry the weight of expectations, and maybe she could have been someone else. As I said, it's a story of possibility. There's a lot of possibility in who Sula Peace could have been. Another through line, just as love. This is a story about love. This is a story about possibility. It's also a story about generational trauma and a generational curse, generational trauma. It's something that is very hard to break. It's something that is very hard to work through and unravel. But I think putting your faith in the power of possibility makes it a little easier to at least try. To do that. Specifically, if you wanna tie the threads together, there's a lot of possibility to come from believing that you are in fact capable of giving and receiving love. And I think that is something that is very much present here. I think even it kind of, that idea also presents the one little silver lining we have here. Even in the end, when Sula Peace is dying, when she is to a point where there's no more pain or anything, and she is having this one last novel experience of her life. In those last moments, the only thing that she thinks is, I can't wait to tell Nell about this. And she, after that, she dies. But the very last thing that she wants is to share this joy with her greatest friend. And if we go to how the book, in like our final moment with Nell, we get something kind of another type of revelation in a way. So this is like the end of the book, and Nell has just visited Sula's grave, and she's walking down the street, and kind of to rewind back, like ever since she caught Jude and Nell and Sula together, she's been carrying something. She's been carrying this, like, this describes like as like a kind of like a gray ball of something, and she refused to look at it, to acknowledge it, because she was just so afraid of what she would see. But in this final moment, after she's visited Sula's grave, and just feeling just a lot of heaviness there, the ball pops, and she finally, now that it's finally out, she finally realizes that what she's been carrying with her is grief over the loss of her greatest friend. Like, all this time, she didn't want to look at it because she thought that she was just so unraveled by her husband leaving her, her family coming apart. She thought all this time, she thought that was a thing that she couldn't face, like the fact that her husband had left her, but it wasn't. She realized, like, this whole time, what she really truly grieved was that she no longer had her greatest friend with her. Like, she no longer could, because Sula had done this unforgivable thing to her, and so they that she had to, like, she lost her husband, but she also lost her Sula. And in that moment, and thinking back to the end of Sula's life, and also something that I said at the beginning. As I said, this is a story about love. Love lost, love found, love missing, and love that transcends even the greatest hurt. And so I think that we can also tie this to this idea of possibility. Even in the end, after all this hurt, this pain, this just so many bad things that's gone on between them, in the end, the only thing that they had, the last thing that they shared was only love. Transcended, truly did. Maybe Sula was kind of onto something. Like, the love that they shared was like truly transcendent. And I think if Nell and Sula, even all that they went through as children, as adults with each other in their own lives, if in the end they could still find it in them to love each other and share an affection with each other and share in joy with each other, you just gotta ask, like, what are the rest of us capable of? What can we do? And I think if anything, I think we're all capable of loving more than ourselves. When you lead with that, there's so much possibility there, and that's kind of the end of my story. That's the last thing I gotta say. So that's it. So thank you for watching. If you've read Sula, let me know what you think. Did you draw a better conclusion than I did? How do you feel? All that stuff, like, let me know. And also, before I go, I want to give a little shout out to, like, my favorite tattoo is a quote from Sula. I didn't talk about it, but this is when she's talking to her grandmother, right when she comes back, and her grandma's like, you need to settle down, you need to do all this stuff. And she says, like, there's, like, the fire of hell is burning in you, And Sula says, whatever's burning in me is mine. Let me see if I can. And that like has stuck with me like so long. Like as I said, like I've read this book at several points in my life, and I think this was like early-ish 20s when I was like, might have been in college, like barely post-college, and I was just feeling a lot of pressure to like just be a certain way, to be a certain person. And I think that quote, like it just stuck with me because like that's something that like I feel deeply, that like if I have nothing, I have myself, I have my autonomy, I have my passions, I have my drive, I have my imagination. And I think that's something that is so important. And it's like it's just so necessary to just, it's just so necessary to me to like just remind myself of that. Like when I'm making my decisions, I'm always like, you know, what do I want? Like what do I truly want? And I think that's something that like is so important for us as women specifically to carry with you, that like ultimately what you want to do is what matters the most. And this is whether you want to like, do you want to be a full-time homemaker and a mother? Absolutely do that. You want to climb a corporate ladder? Absolutely do that. Want to be an entrepreneur? Absolutely do that. Do you want to quit your job today to pursue a passion, to try to like to make that work? Not even try to like make that work. Do that. I'm just, yeah, and it just like always reminds me, like I'm just so like grateful with how much like opportunity I have, and how like available the world is to me, and how like my own autonomy is so available to me, if that makes sense. But yeah, if you watched this far, thanks for indulging me. If you have a book tattoo, let me know. Let me know about that, because I love that. I have like James Baldwin here too. If that wasn't clear, like I love James Baldwin by the name of this channel, but like yeah, I just let me know. But anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. Read Sula. Let me know what you think about it, and catch you in the next one.